You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, hello, hello. All right, today I'm joined by Melanie Lockert. She is the founder of the blog and author of the book, Dear Debt. Through her blog, Melanie chronicled her journey out of $81,000 in student loan debt. Her work has appeared in Allure, Business Insider, Credit Karma, Fortune, and more. She is also the co-founder of the Lola Retreat and host of the Mental Health and Wealth podcast. Melanie lives in LA and enjoys jazz music, traveling, coffee, and spending time with her 2 cats and her partner. All right, so this is such a good conversation, and we do take it down quite a few roads, but we start by hearing some more of the details of Melanie's journey to becoming debt-free. She also takes a look back at her childhood and shares where she believes a large portion of her money mindset comes from. This is something that she's said that she's not shared too much about publicly before, so we're super excited and grateful for her for sharing. We talk about debt and depression, the connection between money and identity, and how her story of going from debt to debt-free has sort of, filtered into other areas of her life, and all of that will make sense when you hear it. We get into a little bit about higher education, student loans, and so much more. You're going to relate to this on so many levels. Anyway, before we get into the conversation, speaking of money, I want to share a fun little thing I signed up for. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. I have seen this link on other creators' link trees and websites, and for whatever limiting belief of a reason I had, I just never thought that I could sign up for something like that, but why not, right? So Buy Me a Coffee is a way for you to support your favorite creators. Perhaps you've supported some other creators in the past. And yay, you can buy me a coffee. Oh my gosh, how fun is that? My page is linked in the show notes, and you will see that I share there that any amount of money I receive from you through this platform, through Buy Me a Coffee, will quite literally be used to buy me coffees to keep me going on this journey, but that it may also over time add up to be able to contribute to other things and services that would help me to continue to build this show and brand. For example, additional babysitting services would be awesome, because then I can carve out a few more hours here and there to produce shows, social media content, or maybe finally dive into business development. Who knows? Let's get crazy. Anyway, so if you'd like to monetarily support me and this show, head over to my page on buymeacoffee.com/sasssays and check it out. Again, linked in the show notes. Thank you in advance. And now let's hear from Melanie. Hey, Melanie. So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is great. We don't often talk about the connection between the two things that you talk about every day. So I'm excited. That being said, why don't you just start and share a little bit about your story and why you have come to do this work that you do with your show and your writing and all that good stuff.
Of course, yes. My main passions are money and mental health. And I got interested in this subject about a decade ago in 2012 when I was deeply depressed about my student loan debt. So to make a long story short, I borrowed $81,000 in total for my undergraduate degree in theater. And most of that came from a master's degree in performance studies from New York University, aka NYU, a fancy private school.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had big dreams of becoming a professor and getting a PhD. And midway through my program, I realized that academia was not for me. And so I was like, oh man, I don't feel like I'm going to get a PhD and be a professor anymore. I guess I might go back to the nonprofit world in arts education. But now I just took out all of this debt for a dream that's not really happening. And so I graduated with my master's in 2011 with performance studies. I had wanted to do something similar to what I did before, which was working in art education at a nonprofit. And I was hoping to make like 50,000, 60,000. My highest salary before that was like 38,000 as a program director in Los Angeles for an arts education nonprofit. And this was in 2011, so still a few years after the Great Recession. And I just went on interview after interview after interview. Like it must have been 30 interviews, several of them second, third, and fourth interviews. And you get to that point where you're like, oh, I'm so close to getting a job. And then they go with the other candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And after 6 months of that, I moved to Portland, Oregon, because my then partner was there. And I was like, this long distance isn't working, paying for rent in New York. And also, my student loans isn't really working. So maybe I'll have more success in Portland. That was not the case. I immediately found temp jobs for $10 to $12 an hour. I was on food stamps briefly. And it really just messed with my mental health because this was not the vision of my life that I had for getting a master's degree. I had left my job in Los Angeles to go to grad school. I, wanted to make this dream work, and then the dream shifted. And then I was in a worse financial position than I was afterwards. And so for all of 2012, I was super depressed, crying every day, feeling like I've made so many mistakes that just irrevocably ruined my life. I don't know how I'm going to get out of debt. I'm making $10 to $12 an hour. Like I'm actively depleting my savings to try to pay off my debt. And, everything just felt out of reach for me. And then about a year of being in that stuck place, I was like, okay, nothing's changing. I'm miserable. I have to do something differently. And I discovered personal finance blogs. And so as much as I fell in love with everyone's story about paying off debt, I was like, I feel like no one's talking about the impact that debt is having on someone's mental health, on someone's, emotional relationship to money. And so I thought, what if I spend the energy that I'm spending crying, being upset, obsessing towards something creative, towards interesting, to try to move this forward? So in January 2013, almost 10 years ago, I started my blog, Dear Debt, as a way to keep myself accountable to pay off the debt. And that was just like the first start in something that completely changed the trajectory of my life and career. Once again, to make a long story short, I started blogging. I would keep monthly updates about my debt repayment progress, my side hustle progress. About 6 months into blogging, I realized that other bloggers were making money as a freelance writer for other websites and other blogs. And I thought, well, I have a master's degree. I would love to, do a side hustle from home, because at this point I was doing side hustles as like a brand ambassador, a pet sitter,
Mm-hmm.
an event organizer, a mover, like anything people would pay me for. I was doing all of these things. And so I started side hustling as a freelance writer, and that's turned into my career eventually. And that career helped double my income. I did eventually find a nonprofit job for 31,000, but then I became a freelance writer and making 60,000 in that first year. And then I was able to pay off my debt in December 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a book published of the same name, Dear Debt. I had an event series called Lola Retreat about women and money. And then now to this day, I'm the podcast host of the Mental Health and Wealth Show, because it's just been so clear to me over the almost decade that I've been doing this that there is a huge link between debt and depression and money and mental health.
Okay, so lots of questions. The first one that's coming to mind, and I hope you take this in the way I intend it, in the best way. Um, you know, there are a lot of people that have debt, and there are, a handful of the people that have debt go on to pay it off. Not a lot of them then make a career out of talking about it. Was that like, hey, I'm really enjoying this and I'm going to keep it going? Or was that part of the pay it off and now you just are still doing it? Do you go what I'm saying? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of go through this journey, but don't actually continue it as a platform. I'm curious what
Yeah.
that shift was like for you and why.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question. So, first of all, I totally fell into this. I mean, I absolutely had no idea when I started the blog that you could make money from blogs, that you can
Mm,
make money from writing. I had no idea about making money online, like total newbie, right?
mhm,
And so, like I said, it started off as a side hustle and then eventually became my career. And it was one of those situations where, it originally was a side hustle to pay off the debt,
mm,
but then I had built up a career to do it full time. And I was like, this is the most money I've ever made out of any job. And
mhm,
like, I'm pretty sure that I can't go find a nonprofit job or something similar. Or even if I can find a similar job, it's not going to pay as much and not give me as much flexibility.
mm,
So, it's interesting. I had always thought that I wanted to be self-employed, but I just never saw an avenue for that happening. And then here was this avenue to make that happen.
yeah.
And so I think sometimes we get what we want, but it's in a different package than how we imagined. And so, and to your point of like, you kept continuing. So I'll be honest, like the Dear Debt blog is still up, but I'm not very active. So
Okay.
I did have that moment of like, what do I do now? I've paid off my debt. So it's like, you know, I was like, I don't want to be the debt person forever because I'm no longer in debt. I haven't been in debt for 7 years.
Right.
And that's, I started Lola Retreat, the Women in Money event in 2017. And so
Mhm.
from 2017 to 2019, I had 4 events in Los Angeles, New York, Portland, Seattle. We had like 60 women come together to learn about money. That was like right after the whole Me Too, movement and, feeling really inspired to connect women. And, then that's been on pause since the pandemic. And I don't know if there's a future in that, to be honest. And then, I was like, what am I still passionate about? And it's like, well, money and mental health. It's not as exclusive as debt and depression,
Okay.
but it's more expansive with money and mental health because in my work, writing, speaking, blogging, podcasting, I've just seen these topics again and again and again. And it's clear that your mental health affects the way you approach money. And it's
Mhm,
very clear that your financial situation affects your mental health. I've seen it both ways. And
mhm,
so that's kind of what has kept me going through this time is, I've had different projects, I've had different pivots. The flexibility of self-employment is amazing. I'll be honest, like I am at a point right now, 8.5 years into self-employment, where I am kind of wondering what's next for me.
mhm.
And does that mean a pivot in this space, a pivot out of this space? Does it mean a job going back to more of what I used to do in the arts world? To be honest, I don't know, but I do want to be honest with where I'm at because I am questioning some of these things myself because I'm at that place where, and this actually really relates to money and mental health. I realized that the financial trauma of me being on food stamps and being broke and paying off my debt, I overcorrected so hard to pay it all off, to make money, to find this very lucrative writing niche in finance. And then now it's like I've built a quote successful career around it. But then now, 8.5 years in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so far away from the person that used to teach theater,
Mhm.
that used to do theater workshops with homeless women and kids in elementary school in Harlem. And I miss that part of my life.
Yeah.
And so now I'm kind of like, oh man, now I'm looking out, like zooming back out and being like, that might have been also financial trauma, that I overcorrected so hard to focus solely on the money and the career aspect because I was so desperate for some sense of financial stability, career stability. And obviously, it does take some level of privilege to even have this thought of like, do I want to pivot? Do I want to change? Like, obviously, I wouldn't have that thought if I was still financially unstable like I was in the past. So it's just interesting. I think with money and mental health, almost all the time we're doing something in reaction to something, like either in accordance to that thing or in opposite of that thing.
Mm.
And it's like sometimes we have these overcorrections where it's like, oh, like your trauma made you work hard. Like this experience, like people are always like, oh, you turned your pain into your passion. And I'm like, yeah, I did. But like now, 8.5 years in, I'm wondering, what have I lost in this
Mm.
period? And I feel like I've lost some of my creativity, some of my original purpose before I got into this. And so, yeah, I just wanted to be honest because that's
Yeah.
totally where I'm at right now in my life and business, that I'm questioning a lot of things. I don't have the answers yet. I'm, open to figuring out what that looks like, what's fulfilling to me. But I'm, in a privileged position financially to say, money is not the most important thing for me right now. What is the more fulfilling thing that makes me feel like I have a purpose and that I want to keep going? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think I know people are listening and relating on so many levels. And it's funny that you say that because one of the, kind of notes that I had made was interesting to go from performance art, theater to now like just talking, living, breathing finance, money all day. It just seems totally like right brain, left brain, and just completely opposite of where you started. And I knew in the prep that you had gone to NYU and it was the school debt that kind of propelled this, but I wanted to ask you what your master's was in. I was assuming it
Yeah.
was, at the very least even like psychology or something like that. And to hear like such a degree of shift is pretty, I don't know, it's interesting. It's interesting that you can do both.
Yeah. I mean, I got my degree in performance studies and it was mostly around social justice theater. So when I lived in New
Mm,
York, I was doing anti bullying work through theater with kids,
wow.
and also doing some of this unique program called Theater of the Oppressed with
Mm,
homeless women. It's a very unique methodology. And I loved my life and time there. And then, I kind of felt like I got, a little disgruntled by the state of the world and the economy. And I was like, I didn't go to NYU with my parents paying for it. I got into a boatload of debt
yeah.
and no one's going to save me. Like I
Yeah.
mentioned this in my book, Dear Debt, that I went through kind of the 5 stages of grief
Mm,
with paying off debt. And for a long time, I was in denial. Like I wouldn't check my Mint account. I was angry. I was angry my parents didn't save for me. I was in the bargaining stage, like I was hoping right now, like for student loan forgiveness, which,
yeah.
hopefully happens. I don't know, it's in limbo right now. But eventually I realized, I just have to accept that I took on all this debt and I have to pay it back. And I do want to caveat this because you mentioned earlier that a lot of people have debt. And I do want to say that I have an abnormal risk tolerance to debt. Like I I had plenty of people in my class who took on 6 figures of debt. It did not face them.
Mm,
I wish I could be that person. I wish it did not eat me alive and make me feel so depressed and anxious. But for whatever kind of financial trauma or mental health issues I have, I do not like the feeling of owing someone money. I
mhm.
don't like the feeling that a part of my income is going towards something else. And I just knew that I would feel so much better paying it off immediately. So I want to say that as well,
Yeah.
because there are plenty of people out there that pay the minimum, they're fine with it. It doesn't affect their life or their mental health. And that's fantastic if that's you.
Yeah.
It was not the case for me.
Yeah. I think too, though, I think because we're so conditioned in this culture here, I think in the US, that um we don't talk about money, right? And we don't talk the same with mental health, right? We don't talk about these things. They're taboo. um I think that while there are people who might identify with you as being like, nah, no way. And then you have people like, I'm thinking of my parents who are like, bring it on, we'll figure it out. Like they're very much like this. And I also think that there is a large portion of the population who's never given a thought either way. Like the fact that you can state and identify that that is an issue for you takes work. And I'm curious now in hindsight, can you look back on your life and identify or 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 determine like why you think that you sway to that end of the spectrum versus the take it on, who cares?
Yeah. So, um, I haven't really talked about this publicly like often, but it's definitely like a sore spot for me. Um, but my father lost his job when I was 14
Mm,
and he didn't really find a job again.
mm,
Um, and so, I saw my mom work very hard to take care of the family. And I think, as a teenager, seeing the dynamics change, seeing one person no longer able to make money was very triggering for me. And, um, I just told myself I don't ever want to rely on someone else for money. And I want to make sure that I'm safe.
yeah.
And I want to make sure that I'm okay. And yeah, I think that was like a very formative experience for me. And to be honest, I could probably have a lot of therapy sessions around that
Hmm.
because, especially in hindsight, I know for a fact, like, I've been doing lots of therapy work over the past couple of years and, you know, looking at my various behaviors, the reasons I did things. And it's very clear that a lot of my money mindset quote issues or like, you know, low risk tolerance or risk aversion
Hmm.
is related to I want to feel safe with my money. I want to feel like I can take care of myself and I can land on my feet. And, having that experience when I was 14 and basically the problem never got quote resolved.
Mm,
It got managed, um, but also seeing that stress of like who's the one managing that.
yeah.
Um, that was very difficult for me. And then, getting to that place when I was making $10 to $12 an hour and on food stamps is like that never crossed my mind as a potential reality.
Yeah.
And that was also triggering for me to be like, oh my gosh, like that felt a little too close to not being financially well. And so, like I said, I think I overcorrected completely because I was just like, I cannot be in that situation ever again.
Mm,
And to be fair, I don't think I ever will.
mm,
But then, kind of what I was talking about earlier, we have these overcorrections to these negative experiences in our life. And I think that can be natural in a way. But then, when you're healing or healed, I think sometimes you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I lost to get here? What have
yeah.
I given up to get here? And so that's kind of what I'm reckoning with right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. I think that, you know, it, I don't know if there's anything like I can't think of anything else other than like, well, I guess I can think of other things. I was gonna say like money is such a unifying experience in that like we all need it or have it or don't have like it's it's those like all these cliches like it's the way the world goes round and it's like such a impactful part of all of our lives and we all share that but we really don't talk about it and I think that the money mindset and figuring out a person's relationship with money, beliefs about money, feelings about money. I feel like you could go on for days about this. We don't want to often put emotion with money, and it's so emotional. It's so emotional. I mean,
It's
it's
very emotional.
yeah. I mean, I can imagine I'm with you. Like I don't see never in my life would I think that I would be saying like you, like I was on food stamps. I can imagine or can't I don't know if I can or I can't. I don't know, but what I can relate to is that feeling of like, what? Like, I'm sorry? Whose life is this? Who's writing this? Because this is not what I thought. And so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think we give enough thought to it, and I don't think that we place enough emphasis on how traumatic either having a lot of it or having none or being anywhere in between can be. I don't know. It's kind of
Yeah.
mind-boggling actually.
Yeah. And I would like to share with your audience, based on what you just said, that like money mindset issues aren't necessarily related to how little or how much you have. Like everyone
Yeah.
on the spectrum can have money mindset issues.
Yes.
Another podcast I listened to is Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich podcast.
Mm,
And he literally interviews millionaires with far more money than I've ever seen in my life who are scared to spend $8 on blueberries.
wow.
So it's like
Yeah.
money mindset issues aren't just going to go away if you get super wealthy. So, all of that to say, you can be in poverty. You can be, quote, broke, which is different than being poor. You can be
Mm,
lower middle class, upper middle class, wealthy, super wealthy, ultra wealthy. None of these stratifications make you immune to money mindset issues because we all have childhood baggage, we all have money baggage. A lot of people are maybe potentially overcorrecting from some sort of thing, or they're trying
mm,
to project an image. Let's not forget we live in capitalism and we want people to view us a certain way. So people spend their money so that they can manipulate people into thinking certain things about them.
yeah, just a casual thing that we have going on here.
Yeah.
And you know, it's something else that I've heard you talk about is, you know, the idea of I think more specifically you talk about it with debt, but I think money in general, it's like it becomes a part of your identity. And I know you've talked about how almost a fear or an uncertainty of who am I going to be when I pay this off? Like, can you talk a little bit about the identity shift that you went through from being one person to now this person and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, like, obviously, I can't share what this is like for other people because it's inextricably linked with me creating a public blog around paying off debt. So
Mm,
maybe I would have had a different experience had
mhm,
I, just had a group chat with my friends, but this was like a public accountability tool for me. So
mhm,
on one hand, I had this very great and effective public accountability tool, the blog Dear Debt, which later led to a book, which later led to my career. So all these great things, right?
mhm,
But then, I do remember I wrote a Dear Debt letter, which are breakup letters to debt, probably in August 2015, before the December 2015 when I paid it off. And I remember feeling so nervous and scared about who I would be after paying off debt because first of all, I had this whole blog related to paying off debt, and I kind of guessed correctly that I wouldn't want to be blogging about this topic forever if I was no longer paying off debt. And
mhm.
then for two, it requires a lot of mindset shifts to pay off that level of debt. So, I had to get rid of this idea that all debt is good debt because that thought did not serve me. If that's a thought that serves you, great. But for me,
All debt is good debt. Is that what
I
you
mean,
said?
sorry, not all student loans are good debt.
Okay, that makes more sense
Sorry.
now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Wait a minute, what?
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. So like in the
Yes,
personal finance world, sometimes we have, oh, this is quote good debt and this is bad debt, right?
got it.
And so
Okay.
student loans and mortgages are quote good debt because they
Yeah.
can be leveraged for your education, whatever.
Mhm,
And while that is a helpful thought for some people, me just sitting on that, oh, student loans are the good debt. that was not a helpful thought for me to pay off my debt.
Mm.
So I had to like say that thought's not helpful for me. Also, the thought that everyone has debt. Well, I don't want to be everyone.
Mhm.
That thought is also not helpful for me.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I just looked at my options and I was like, I could do income driven repayment and make my loan payments a very small percentage of my income for 20 to 25 years. But then I did the math and I was like, I don't want to be in my 50s and paying off my student loans. Like that does not feel right to me. And once again, if that's you and you feel comfortable with that, that is great.
Right.
That is not what I felt comfortable with.
Mhm.
I was like, I want these gone yesterday and I want to be building wealth for my future. And then hopefully by my 50s, I'm, in a much better position, focusing on trying to retire.
Mhm.
These are all my personal choices. So, the mindset shifts required to pay off debt were a lot. And then it's like you change so much to make that work. And then you're like, who am I going to become after I pay off this debt? And then also for context, I had been in debt my whole entire adult life.
Mhm.
So I remember when I was 17, my dad brought me the FAFSA paperwork and said, if you want to go to college, fill these out. Like that was it. And
Mhm.
like I didn't really know what I was signing. I kind of vaguely understood about student loans, but like not really. It wasn't until after I graduated that I saw how much I owed that I was like, oh wait, I thought I borrowed 18,000, but now it's 23,000. Oh,
Mhm.
this was accruing interest the whole time I was in school. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Like you started learning all of these things later, right?
Mhm.
And so I had been in student loan debt since I was 17. I had paid it off like when I was 31. And so thinking, who am I going to be without this debt? Am I going to make the right decisions to actually put that money towards my future, right? Like, am I going to be who I want to be after this? Or have I clung so hard onto this identity that I'm going to be lost at sea? So just like a lot of existential questions when you build an identity around a specific topic.
Mhm.
And it was just another season, another challenge. Like obviously I got through it and I'm doing better. And then, because it's been 7 years, like I can confidently say that paying off debt will absolutely change your life and make it better, but it does not solve all of your problems.
Right.
I mean, I've had plenty of different personal, professional health problems over the past 7 years where it's like, oh, wow, you still have problems. Like
Yeah.
being debt free doesn't absolve you from being a human being in this very complicated world.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I will say it is very liberating to have these quote life problems, health problems, relationship problems, what have you, and to be able to throw money at the problem.
Mm.
So one of the quotes that I love, which I'm not sure where I heard it from to be honest, but it's something like if money can solve the problem, then it's not really a problem.
Mm.
Like, and if
Mhm.
money can't solve the problem, like,
Go to
but like,
therapy.
and sometimes, money is the problem. So it's like, if you have a health issue, throw money at the problem, go to therapy, go to a doctor, see whatever. Oh, your car breaks down, throw money at the problem.
Mm.
It's like having money to throw at the problem makes it not a problem, just something to do, right? Obviously, if you don't have the money to do that, then you have a money problem.
Right.
And then obviously sometimes, you have big life problems that money can't solve, like death, like divorce, like disease.
Mhm.
And, those are the bigger issues where you're like, I wish money could solve this problem because I would throw any and all amount of money to prevent X, Y, and Z from happening, but I can't, right? And
Mhm.
so having that framework of mind has really helped me over the past 7 years. So whenever I do have quote problems, it's like, hey, money can solve this. Just gonna throw money at the problem. Great, done. And obviously being debt free, I have more of a cushion to be able to do that. And then obviously the bigger life stuff where money can't solve it, it's like, okay, well, money can't solve this one. And that's one of those hard life journeys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back a moment. You mentioned the one about you know, school debt is good debt and you just having to shift out of that. Were there other mindset changes? I assume there were that you had to make, and could you share one, two, three more of them, whatever they were?
Yeah, so I would say probably the biggest mindset shift when paying off debt was really getting out of this kind of low income mentality. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is I had always worked in the nonprofit sector. So literally my whole working life, I had made between $30,000 and $38,000.
mm,
And like I said, I was hoping to graduate and make like 50 to 60,000. Like that was like a lot of money for me.
right.
And as I started side hustling and eventually becoming self-employed, and that first year of self-employment, I made $60,000. I thought that was so much money. And then, and this is a whole separate topic that like would be a whole different conversation, but like you can also get very jaded in the other way with online business, seeing how much everyone makes. Like
Mm,
six figures is the minimum, oh,
right.
I had a six-figure launch. I made, 200,000, 300,000. And like you could almost get jaded in the other way where everyone talks about like how much hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars people make online.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, does anyone realize that still the average American income is around 50 to 60,000? Like
No.
I like still like,
Yeah.
want to be inspired and happy for people, but also like that's not necessarily the reality for many, many Americans.
Right.
And it's like straddling that line of like where I came from and where I want to go. It's like, um, so I had to like release myself from some of those limiting beliefs that like
Mm,
making money is greedy, making money is dirty, like you can't make a lot of money doing good things or working for yourself. Making money is hard.
mm-hmm.
I had to get rid of some of those thoughts to be able to make more money. And then I also had to have hard conversations about like charging more. Like I'll be totally honest, like the first 2 years of self-employment, I was charging peanuts. Like I started writing blog posts for $25 because
Mm,
that's what people offered me. And I thought, well, if I can write this quickly, $25 an hour is great. And it was
mm,
at the time. And I felt proud of that. But then you grow and you learn and you have to get out of that. And so there's this book by Barbara Stanny. Her name is now Barbara Hewson, with I think a marriage. And there's this wonderful book called Overcoming Under Earning, which really helped me. And so I would say that was a big mind shift because sometimes under earning, like, isn't just about the field you pick, but it's also how much you value yourself, how much you feel like you can take space. And that's been a whole other like, wow, why did I feel so called to the nonprofit world, helping other people and getting paid peanuts at the expense of my financial stability and wellness? Like, why did I feel so compelled? And, not to say that there's no glory or kindness or compassion in those fields, but I think sometimes we do that because we don't value ourselves and we think the only way I'm of value is if I'm doing something for someone else. And I was definitely like that. I had low self-esteem. Um, and that low self-esteem meant I'm only valuable if I'm giving to others at the expense of myself. And
mm,
so I think self-employment really had me question all of that.
mm,
And so the other big shift about paying off debt was really about getting out of the low income pay trap and say, I can earn more. I deserve more. I'm not a bad person if I earn more. And that's a big struggle when you were making 10 to $12 an hour on food stamps before. And
yeah.
suddenly, you're like, oh, can I make, $100 an hour? Can I make $50 an hour? Oh, these
Yeah.
are possible, and then you just have to get comfortable with that reality.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, if it was if it was easy, then we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation because we, for lack of a better way to say it, like everyone would do it, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
everyone everyone would do it on their own, right? There would be no need for therapists, coaches, people just sharing stories and whatever, you know what I'm saying. So it's it's incredibly difficult and I'm wondering everything that you had to learn about yourself, learn about your past, grow, evolve, heal through all of this, have you transferred those skills? How corporate of me. Have you transferred those skills to other areas of your life? And how has that worked?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't thought about it in that way directly, but I will say that, the resilience of paying off debt
Mm,
and starting a new career
mhm,
and starting over has definitely helped me in other areas of my life. So, for example, um, a little over 5 years ago, I ended a 9 year partnership that was basically like a marriage.
mhm,
And, that was so devastating for me, even though I was the one to initiate it. Um, and, once again, you kind of have those thoughts of like, you think that your life is going to be one thing, and then it turns out to be another. And
mhm.
then you have to start over. And what is it like to be single for the first time in your 30s? What are these dating apps? What are these things? It's like that was so terrifying. So I think like the resilience of paying off debt helped me in that situation because it's like, okay, I can, um, you know, start over.
Yeah,
I
I can do this.
can, I
Yeah.
can do this. Like I've been through challenging times before and I can do it again.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I mean, I think it's been enough years that I could say this, but like, what are the problems in that, like, towards the end was that my then partner, like, admitted they were jealous of my success and my career. And that was like also
Yeah,
clearly not a helpful thought that
right.
you're not really a team if someone like admits to you that they're jealous and envious of you. And so that was like another, I mean, there was many, many, many reasons I won't get into on why that ended, but
Mhm,
one of them,
mhm,
you know, to share here of like, yeah, things can change. Like also people's relationship to you and what happens in your life can change. So, this person saw me through those $10 to $12 an hour food stamp days and then saw me change. And then, it wasn't like how amazing that is. It's like I'm jealous. And so
mm,
that's, not helpful. And so, having to start over completely that way was very difficult. Shortly after that, maybe not shortly, like maybe like a year after that, because I was really messed up for like 3 months to a year, like couldn't eat, barely moved, like my income took a hit because I couldn't work that much. Um, a
because
year
of the
later,
relationship.
yeah, because of the grief of the
Yes.
relationship,
Okay. Just yeah.
after 9 years, just
Yeah, of course,
feeling
yeah.
so grief stricken. Um, Also, there was a lot of codependency there, which is a
Mhm,
separate topic, but like, codependency can be kind of a form of addiction in a sense where it's like, I don't know who I am without this other person. And I don't know what it's like to not be needed anymore.
mm,
And, that was like a lot. And then, like, about a year later, similar to my, debt journey, where it was like a year of being sick of my own stuff, like, I was like, I need to do something different. And so I signed up for a boxing challenge. And for 6 weeks, I boxed 5 days a week. And I was like, I'm not an exercise person. I don't like moving my body. Boxing seems violent and very much not like me at all. And I loved it. Like,
yeah.
I boxed up until very recently. Like I just stopped like a month ago. I'm taking a break to try to maybe do something differently. But like for the past 3 to 4 years, I've been boxing and it's like I never would have seen that happen in my life. Like I'm like the most unboxing person ever. Like doesn't seem like something I would do, but I loved it. It really helped me manage anger that I had from that relationship ending, helped
Mhm,
me deal with resentment. It helped me feel stronger. So
mhm,
this is like a a very silly but practical example. So, when my ex moved out, I still had two cats and it was difficult for me to carry the kitty litter. And so I was like, I need to be physically stronger to carry the kitty litter.
mhm,
So boxing helped with that too, to be able to make life on my own more manageable and stronger. And obviously it helped me build confidence in a new way to do this thing that I never thought would be possible. And so, I was able to change my life and to heal and to become an exercise person suddenly, and to be an amateur boxer, and to, get into a routine. And so, I think these experiences can be carried over in other ways. And I think it's so important to be able to surprise yourself. Like I tell this to friends, like, it's so easy to try to predict the outcome of things, or to assume the worst, or assume it's going to happen this way. Let's look at the magic of possibilities, and also the fact that we just don't know.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
one of the mindset shifts that I have is like, it can be so scary to be like, everything is out of my control and there's so much uncertainty in the unknown. Like, I'm a control freak and I have anxiety disorder. Like, I understand how terrifying that can be. But one of the mindset shifts I try to tell myself is, imagine all of the possibility with this uncertainty. Like, the fact that I don't know means there's a lot of possibility. It can go in any number of ways, right? And so I try to, focus on that I don't know what's going to happen with my life. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but there's a lot of possibility, and I'm going to see how it unravels as it unravels, and not, predict an outcome that may or may not happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a long way to come from, what you shared, being 14 and seeing your parents' world unravel and experiencing trauma to get to that point that you're at now. I'm curious, you know, I'm gonna try to ask this without like asking too many things in one question. um, but I'm wondering how you feel now, given your story, given the journey that you've just shared, and the fact that not a lot's changed in this country as far as education, student loans, debt. Someone comes to you and says, I'm thinking about going to college. I'm thinking about this. Like, where are you at with it? Are you like, don't do it? Are you, here's, do it, but like get a financial advisor and learn how to do it? Are you like, you know what I'm saying? Like, because not a lot's changed. And you know what? I'm with you. Like, I went to the fancy private schools, and there's my husband always kind of jokes with me because, like, you know, I don't know that I needed to go to that school to do what I do now. And so maybe I didn't have to go there. And I'm so grateful for it and all of that. But like, I'm just curious now with all of this hindsight, like, what would you say to someone who's about to enter this phase of their life and they're unsure?
Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack there. And so a common question I get is, oh, do you regret going to grad school? And I can't answer that honestly, in the sense that, because I've seen how it's worked in my favor by turning into Dear Debt and the book and this
Right.
podcast and a new career, obviously I can't say that I regret it. But if you were to ask me those first 2 years before I started the blog, I would have been like, absolutely. I shouldn't have gone to grad school. I shouldn't have gone into that debt. So my experience is very unique. That being said, for other people, I think it's very important to understand that it's very difficult to make a decision at age 17 or 18 about what you're going to do for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. I also think it's very important to understand how interest works, that for student loans, it accrues daily. I also think it's important to understand what your salary is going to look like after, and how that's going to affect your lifestyle. And I'll be very honest, like, when I was thinking about going to NYU, I was talking to everyone and their brother about it. Should I go? Should I not go? Because if I don't go, I can stay at my job and I can pay off my undergrad loans and be debt free and be stable. Or I can move to New York and go to my dream school and triple my debt load. Well, we know what decision I made, and no one could tell me anything. Like, people had tried to tell me, like, are you sure you want to take that much debt? Like, people had tried, and I was stubborn, stubborn, stubborn.
Yeah.
So I do understand that sometimes you literally just can't tell people anything and they have to face the consequences. And hey, I faced my consequences and now it's an interesting story. But I will say that, like, I think a college education is good. I think in most cases it's necessary. However, I think the burden and the problem and the scrutiny really should go toward the higher education institutions.
Yeah.
Because what has happened, especially for graduate schools, we have these things called graduate plus loans, which allow you to borrow up until the cost of attendance. So what does that mean? That means that it's basically a blank check. So schools can charge whatever they want because they know there's a student loan vehicle that can afford it, right? And so if you're wondering why tuition has increased so exponentially, it's because there's a vehicle of debt that can afford it. I mean, can you imagine in any other financial industry, like taking out a mortgage, like taking out a credit card, where someone with no credit history would give you six figures in debt?
No. Yeah. No.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It does not make any sense. And I think, like, I mean, I know your question is like whether students should do this or not. And I think that's a highly individualized choice. And I think, students should understand how much they're borrowing, what their potential salary might be, what their monthly payments are going to look like based on that salary. Because if you're going to put 25, 30, 50% of your salary towards loan payments, your life's not going to be fun. Also, how much interest is going to accrue over the life of the loan. But I think, like so many issues in the United States when it comes to finance, we love to make a systemic problem an individual one.
Yeah.
And so we love to blame, like, people. I'll use me as an example. People love to be like, well, you're just dumb. You went to NYU for performance studies. You're an idiot. Like, the trolls on the internet love to like make fun of me, which that's fine. But it's like, we love to make a systemic problem an individual problem. Like, it's your choice. It's like, but no one's asking, why does school cost $50,000 a year?
Right.
No one's asking that question. And don't you think we should be? Like, why are we blaming kids that are 17, 18, 20, 22, 25? Their prefrontal cortex hasn't even fully developed yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we blaming them instead of the higher education institutions that are charging $50,000 a year for tuition?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an awful, awful cycle because as you're talking, all I'm thinking is, we're intentionally not taught these things, right? Like, we're
Absolutely.
intentionally not taught to keep us all in debt, to keep the money coming to the big incident. It's patriarchy. It's patriarchy.
Patriarchy.
And it's
Patriarchy and
capitalism.
capitalism.
Yes, because
which are sleeping in the same bed, my friend.
yes, because it's like, you know what? I without getting into all of the things that contributed to the schools I went to and why and all the things that, like, there was, I think, similar to so many people I know because I went to school with all of them. It's like the idea of what we were doing there was way shinier than what we did there. And what I mean by that is coming away with a degree from this school with this name didn't give me all that they promised it would.
Oh, absolutely.
But it was like, yeah, it was like, oh, you're going to go here, you're going to be set for life. And it's like, that was the shiny carrot, right? That was the thing that we all wanted, that we all went there for. And then a lot of us graduated and we're still kids and didn't know what we wanted to do. And they were like, oh, sorry. Like, better luck next
Exactly.
time. It's like, there's no
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what caused a big chunk of my depression, because
Mm.
I expected, oh, I went to NYU, I'm going to get all
Yeah.
these opportunities, it's going to
Yep.
open so many doors. And then suddenly, after 6 months to a year, I'm making $10 to $12 an hour. I can't find a job. And it's like, well, that is absolutely not the reality that I thought I was signing up for. And
Yes.
it's a very rude awakening,
Yeah.
very rude.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
yeah.
think that's like causes so much depression and anxiety.
Yeah. And I think, you know, similarly to how you did earlier, you did go to NYU. I did go to Georgetown. We did get these educations, and we're still I think you would agree with me, speaking from a place of privilege. And
Oh,
we're
absolutely. Yeah.
still like, I know you feel the same just in this hour now that we've talked. It's like two things can be true. We
Hmm.
can acknowledge the privilege we have in sort of sitting here kind of complaining or venting about the issues with these really great places that we went to, right? um but still kind of not getting the full promise out of it. Like, it was a marketing thing. It was, I don't know, I just, it's complicated, clearly. um but I don't know, all of a sudden I just got this like vision of two like kind of Ivy League girls like me. Like, our life is so hard. And I know we're not doing that. I just I don't know.
No, but like
Um,
they do promise you a different vision.
yes.
And I think when we look at higher education as a whole,
Mhm,
whether it is, fancy private schools or not,
mhm.
like, student loan debt does, adversely affect people of color and minority borrowers and
Yes.
women.
Yes.
And so, imagine like people who aren't able to make their student loan payments. Or I mean, we've seen the kind of converse. So student loan payments have been on pause right now for a couple of years for federal loans. And we've seen so many people who are like, I've been able to pay down credit card debt, I've been able to
Mhm,
have a savings for the first time, I've been able to, you know uh, pay for my kids to go to daycare or to,
mhm,
activities. And so, we've seen kind of the other possibilities in how these student loan payments can be very difficult for a wide variety of people,
mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay. All right. I did kind of, at this point now it seems off topic, but I'm just curious. Did you have siblings? Do you have
I'm an
siblings?
only child.
You're the child.
No.
Okay. Because I was
Yeah.
just curious. I would have just been curious to know how, two different kids would have come out of that and processed everything. And that's always interesting to me. Anyway, okay. All right. So I think for me, and you tell me otherwise, but to me, this conversation is kind of like perhaps a wake up call for someone who's either experiencing depression or anxiety and wondering where it's coming from, or feeling totally great, but just is something that you want to look at. Like, what is typically your drive home? What do you want people to get out of this conversation, to learn from you, to walk away feeling and knowing from everything we've just said? Because we covered a lot.
Yeah, we covered so much. Well, first of all, I would say that, your money definitely affects your mental health, and your mental health can definitely affect the way that you spend money. And
Mm,
I think the first thing is to be aware of your behaviors. I think awareness is the key to any kind of change. And it's really important to be compassionate with yourself as you start to recognize patterns, or as you start to look at the bigger picture. I also think it's important to, understand that I've experienced both of these things. So I've experienced both clinical depression and situational depression. So,
mm,
in other times of my life, I've had depression that is more clinical, where I'm just depressed because there is something wrong with, either the chemicals in my body or my brain. Something's not working properly, right? Kind of like if you have a broken arm, you go see a doctor, right?
mm,
Me paying off debt, that whole debt journey, that was definitely situational. I
mm,
was depressed because of the debt. And so situational depression can happen, after things like a divorce or death. That's very, kind of quote normal, but it's not like there's anything quote wrong or like, mismatched in your brain, right? So I think knowing those differences can be important. And I say that because sometimes with situational things, like for me, I realized, oh, the only way I'm going to get out of this is to pay off debt because it is exactly related to debt. Whereas previous times, you're just like, this just feels like a never ending ocean of sad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how I'm going to get out of this. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, I need to be on medication.
Mm-hmm.
I need to see a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I need to like get professional help. So I think like knowing the differences can help you understand which route to take. Because I will say, when I was paying off debt, I did go to therapy. And while I thought it was useful to an extent, it wasn't as helpful as the times where I had clinical depression because I was like, the problem really is the debt. I
Mm-hmm.
just need the debt to be gone. Like,
Yeah.
so that kind of helped me move forward. And also just, figure out how you can use your money in a way to support your mental health.
Mm.
How can you have more freedom, more flexibility, spend on things that you enjoy or that you value or, gives you pleasure in helping others, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. You're making me think now.
Good, I hope.
Yeah, it's good, but also like, oh my gosh. It's just yeah. I don't know. My husband and I were just having this conversation this morning. Like, he's like, we're paying X amount for the daycare. We're doing this, we're doing that. He's like, if like basically, long story short, is like I'm not optimizing or I'm not, let's see, again, I'm making it like I'm doing something, but like I am having a hard time keeping up with my work schedule. And he's like, if we're paying for this childcare and it's not working, why are we paying for it? He's like, what is it? Like, how can we make the windows easier or better or more effective or more productive? And I was like, basically saying that the windows that I have, it's like I feel like I'm playing catch up in our house. Like I come home and I'm doing this interview with you right now, but I'm very aware of the mess that's downstairs in my kitchen. And if we didn't have this scheduled, I would probably be cleaning that instead of, you know, I don't know, pitching a sponsor or doing
Hmm.
something else. And so it's just interesting that you say that because yeah, and for me, that's mental health because it's the conversation led to, is it time to look into someone who can help you with housekeeping? Is it time to consider that? And it hasn't happened before because we don't have just like money to throw at it, as you used the words earlier of like having a problem or not, and this and that. But it's like, if we're paying this much for the childcare so that you can do the work, but the work is not happening, he's like, maybe we need to spend more. And I'm like, okay. I don't know. It just, yeah. Cause I don't know about you, but I'm like, if there's like mess, and I have toddlers, so there's always mess, but like, if there's mess, it's hard for me to be like, I'm gonna ignore it. I'm gonna just send some emails. And this is a issue of like working from your house too. But I don't know. And it's
Yeah.
just interesting. It's just that is right there a connection between mental health and money that I wouldn't, 3 hours ago, I wouldn't have necessarily like seen it that way. So it's just interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, and I actually do want to go back to something we mentioned earlier, is talking about how we make systemic issues an individual problem. This does not sound like it's a you problem. To me,
No.
this is a systemic failure that there is not easily and affordable, readily available childcare in this
No,
country. Like,
it's so
we do not
expensive.
support women, we do not support families.
No.
And the fact that people often have to choose between, I'm either going to not pay for childcare and at the expense of my career, or I'm going to pay for childcare and it's going to cost me a second mortgage or be, 50 to 75 to 100% or more of my income.
Hmm.
And it's like, these options are lose lose for women and families. And it makes
Hmm.
me sick to my stomach. I'm childless, by the way, so I can't personally like share my experience, but it makes me so angry
Yeah.
because all of my parent friends are in this situation.
Yeah. It's
And,
exhausting.
obviously I've thought like, what would that look like for me? And that's like one of the main questions is like, this just feels so unfair. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to share that with you because once again, in personal finance, we love to make it an individual problem. Like, oh, it's your fault. Why aren't you making it work? Like,
Right.
just get a house cleaner and the childcare and
Yeah.
make it all work. It's
I
like,
caught myself too.
no,
You
all
saw
of
that.
the
Yeah.
all of the numbers aren't like there's there's that saying like the math isn't mathing here
Right.
because it's too much, but it's
Yeah.
too much because there isn't equitable support in this country for childcare. Like, no one should have to either, you know, lose out on their career to stay at home with their kid, or they're paying 50 to 100% of their income or more to have their kid in childcare. Like that's not like a fair choice for anybody.
Yeah.
And the fact that like millions and millions of women are doing that in the US every day, like we need paid family leave, we need sick leave, we need more affordable childcare. Like, I don't know what else we need to do or what can be done, but it's like one of the issues that just like inflames me so much because
Yeah.
all of my parent friends are in this exact situation and they think it's a personal failing that like, how come I can't make it work? How come I can't, get all the work done that I need to get done and clean the house? It's like, because it's actually impossible.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
actually impossible.
Well, and this is also, you know, touching on like we bought a ticket to a ride that we thought was going to be fun and it's not. Like, you sign up for this and you think it's going to be glorious and you're going to love it and everything's Pinteresty and fun and sunshine and roses, and it's not. And it's not in such deeply impactful ways. Like, it's not like, oh, I thought this would be fun. Oh darn, there's poop on me. It's like you deal with that. No, what you don't expect is to have like a total identity crisis and financial crisis in just bringing life into the world. Like, you don't expect it to the level that it is. And similarly to you, it's like I thought life would be one way. I thought I might enjoy being home with children, and I don't. I
And
don't.
and actually, I'm so glad that you're mentioning that. And I think that's very important for people to consider if they're on the fence about having kids or not. Like,
Mm,
it may be one way or it may be not. You just, and once again, life will unfold as it does. You don't know. And then also, I just want to kind of like spin that in the sense that I get a lot of flack for, being child free because people don't understand it. People want to question me about, this, that, or the other. And, I'm very aware that that's one of those decisions that you can't be like, well, I don't like this. Let me just return this to the store. Like, you can't do that.
like,
And so it's like, I don't understand why people that like know that about themselves like aren't being congratulated. Like, we're being met with so much criticism. Like, are you sure that's the life you want? Are you sure that's okay? And it's like, aren't you glad that I know that I'm not ready to make a decision, that I know that like if I don't feel this works out for me, that I can't just like go back to the store and return it. Like,
right. Yeah.
it's just it's wild to me that like,
Yeah.
and I saw this thing on Instagram the other day that was just like, when are you having kids? Oh, when are you having another one? Oh, wow, 3 kids is a lot. It's just like,
Yeah.
it showed that like literally no women can like win. You
Yeah.
don't have kids, like, oh, are you just gonna be a crazy cat lady? Do you hate kids? You have 1 kid. When are you having more? You have 2 kids? Oh, when are you having more? 3 kids? Oh, wow, that's a lot. Like, it's just
Yeah.
like people just need to stay out of women's business.
Yeah.
And also, but like, yeah, make a choice that you feel comfortable with, but then also whatever those results are, like, understand it might look way different than you thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much is coming to mind as you're talking. And I think just for me, it's like when I advise someone who's pregnant or like friends who are pregnant or are thinking about having kids, it's like, sure, make your plan, but have a plan for when you want to change the plan. like,
Yeah.
like know what you're gonna like between you and your partner, your support system, whoever it is, like if the plan is for you to stay at work and you're home and you decide you don't want to go back to work, that can't be a crumbling moment. It has to just be this moment that you get through and vice versa. Like, because I think where I got stuck at the time was making a choice that I thought I'd be happy with and then feeling so much guilt around wanting to change the choice.
Yeah.
And like guilt and pressure and resentment and all the things that I never expected. Like there's never in my life prior to that been a decision that I made that I couldn't change without the level of ripple effect as that one. Like I don't know if
Hmm.
I think my grammar was like totally off
No,
on that,
I
but
got
you
it
feel me.
totally.
It's like
Yeah.
it's just and you don't think about it. And so it's like make your choice, plan it one way, but also talk about what's going to happen if you change your mind,
Hmm.
and we don't, I don't know. I hate to like be so, I don't know, jaded or bitter, but it's like, I am on one hand, I think we're just like intentionally not prepared. We're not taught because it's like, cool, just keep women like totally just losing their minds. You know what I mean? Like just keep messing with them. That's fine.
Keep them busy and quiet.
Yes. Yeah, anyway. All right. Well, Melanie, we've gone down a tangent now and it sounds like we could go on 35 more. So I just want to thank you for your time today. And it's such an important conversation and I appreciate you and your platform. And even if you pivot, we'll all be here watching, supporting you.
Yay.
So
Well,
thank
thank
you so much.
you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Okay, I really love this conversation, and I know I say that all the time, but I truly take something so awesome out of every conversation I have, and this one is no different. And I think the most profound moments for me centered around Melanie's self reflection on yes, I'm debt free. I created a career and a life for myself around getting out of debt, and I'm helping others, and I love that. All of it's great, but what have I lost? In her case, she shared that she lost a piece of herself, her creativity, and her original why and purpose in life. And I just really thought that was so profound because I don't know that I can think of anything in life that doesn't come with that give and take. All the slogans and things and expressions are, kind of bouncing around in my head, like about life being a balancing act. And when you think about all of the buckets we all try to fill up with our time and energy, our kids, marriage, career, taking care of our body, taking care of our soul, and so forth, we often hear about how it's almost impossible, right, to have all of those buckets full at the same time. We might get the career thing going, but that might inevitably mean that we spend less time with our family, or maybe we leave work to stay home with our family. And then perhaps some of our creativity and drive and whatever you would use to describe the work that you do, what it gives you, whatever that is, it's going to dwindle. It's going to, it's going to be lost a bit, right? And I just really appreciated the realness of those moments with Melody because, we can all look like everything is great, right? How many people do I interview here with a great business or a great brand or whatever they have going on, and we just see that one thing about them. But it's rare that in all of that greatness of something that something else isn't lost. And when I apply this to myself and I think about the last 2 to 3 years, mind you, there was a global pandemic in there, but I've gained so much amazing insight on myself, my personal development, my mental health, coping strategies, all the things, self-care, and overall learnings about myself, how I function best and how I fit into the world around me. I've gained so much in that area. But what have I lost? And it's a really quick answer for me. I've lost connection. I talked about this a bit in my last solo show. I'll link it in the show notes, but I've turned so far inward and I've gained so much, but I've certainly lost some connection to the people around me, to the outside world around me. And, just like Melanie, that's okay. That happens, right? I'm steadier over here now. She's now steadier and feeling more solid in her finances. I'm feeling steadier and more solid with my mental health. So now I can kick around some ideas and take some steps to regaining some of what I lost. And for me, that's connection and socialization. And as Melanie shared for her, that's creativity. That's her love of theater and art. And, I just think it was a really cool moment, especially in editing the show. You heard me when she first mentioned it on the show. You may not have noticed. I do, because it's funny, when I'm editing, I will often find, and I know a moment really hits me when I have the same reaction to what someone says as I do the first time I heard it. So when Melanie first shared and said, what have I lost? As I'm editing, I go, huh. And then I hear myself say, huh, on the recording. And I just, yeah. And I think what's so great, and I hope you're taking it the same, is it's not sad. It's not a sad thing, right? Like, she needed to go through the journey that she did. Like, she needed, as she talked about, like, she needed to pay off her debt to even be able to now think about enjoying theater, because she wasn't enjoying it before. I was not enjoying being around people and interacting and having fun, because I was so miserable inside and in my own head about things. So, it's not meant to be a sad, devastating, what have I lost? It's meant to just be a reflection. Okay, we really worked on this for a long time, feeling better about it, feeling more secure. So now let's take a moment to reflect and see where we need to go next. What pieces do we need to pick up? So really cool. I don't know. I just really like that. And it's just feeling so relevant to me right now. So anyway, that is all I've got for you. And as usual, I will catch you next time. All right. Thanks, Melanie. Thank you for listening. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.